Hello, everyone. Quick show of hands, who's currently founder or CEO of their company? Leave them up for a second. How many, keep your hand up if you would like to be running your company 5 or 10 years from now? Is that because you want to sell it? Okay. So hopefully this is relevant for you. Really, the topic of this presentation came about from actually a class that I was in at Harvard about 20 years ago. And it was a class that just really pissed me off. And the topic, it was about leadership, and it was an organizational behavior class. And the professor was saying, well, you know, the research shows that, you know, entrepreneurs and leaders are best attuned to certain phases of a company. So there's, like, they had this model of 4 life cycles, 4 stages in a company, and starting it up and managing high growth, and then kind of your chainsaw Al, fixing it and the like, and, you know, sustaining it. And they said, the research shows that most entrepreneurs can't shift from one phase to another, that their leadership styles are kind of tethered to one phase. And as an, you know, budding entrepreneur, it just pissed me off. I was like, what, you're saying that I'm going to grow my company and then I'm going to have to give it to somebody else to run? That's my baby. And it's, well, that's what the research shows. And so now, kind of fast forward 20 years, I've had a lot of experience in kind of that 0 to 20 million startup phase. And then now, actually growing it kind of north of that, and I probably have a newfound appreciation for that research. It doesn't piss me off as much as it still bugs me. And I wanted to share some of the lessons of transitioning from one phase to the next. Is there a clicker here? Let me just pull that. There is not. Oh, here we go. So really the topic here is I'm thinking about startups. How do you build and grow a team out of the gate? And then what does your role look like in that phase? And I think of the startup in that 0 to 20 million range, or that 0 to kind of 50 to 100 folks. And then high growth, and it all depends on kind of what kind of business you're in and the size and scales, but you're just rough metrics. The second phase is really about, you know, as you're growing a company, how do you manage it as a company gains greater maturity, and how do you as founder or CEO change your role in how you relate to people? And I'll talk about the third phase at the end. And I really think about growing the company in these 2 phases. And the early stage for me is that Series A angel round, getting it up and running. It's that really exciting time where you're growing at, you know, 10,000% because you got your base is small, and you know, that's one of the joys of entrepreneurship. It's also one of the absolute pains, but you know, they come hand in hand. Now, when I think about managing growth, I think about more of your kind of Series C, kind of if you happen to be in a venture-backed model, but now you're maybe north of 100 people or north of 20 million, and now you're talking about double-digit growth rates, and that could be high or low, and that's kind of where I'm thinking about that phase. And my mental model for this is in that early stage, I really think of it as kind of fighter pilot. Where I'm looking at is I've got the wide open skies. I can go I can go up, down, I can do circles, I can go left or right. And wherever I look, I point and I go. And navigating those empty skies is about reading and reacting, and it's about moving, you know, you're running your ship and it can move in any direction. The model that I think about for managing growth is more like being a sea captain, because you're in an ocean. You're obviously not, you know, you're a little bit more limited in how you go. And whatever direction you're moving in, it has momentum because you're taking hundreds of people behind you. And so you've got to understand the waves that you're riding. You've got to keep an eye on the weather and the overall environment. And most importantly, to really move the ship, you've got a full crew. And that's a little bit of a different challenge. In building teams in the early stage, my philosophy in the first stage is whatever it takes. And when I think about growing and starting a company, you know, it's all about speed, rapid prototyping, quick iterations. You know, you're trying to build a brand from nothing. You're trying to attract customers for nothing. But when I think about the team in that early stage, it's really about flexible generalists. I look for smart, talented, motivated people that can play 10,000 roles, because I have no idea. They could be building a pick and pack center one day and they could be defining a marketing program the next. So I look for just smart people that are passionate and will do whatever it takes. And, you know, in that, it's a very different kind of culture. When you move towards kind of managing a high growth company, it's not about that quick iteration, rapid prototypes. That's still an element of it, but you kind of have to have a longer-term vision and a product roadmap. You're growing the brand, and it's not just about acquiring customers. Now you got to understand them and kind of think of them in different ways. Every time I started a company, I just thought of a customer as monolithic, someone that paid me. And if I had more, that was better. And then as you start to grow and you've got maybe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of customers, you got to say, well, there's different camps. I need to understand each one and develop products for them. The biggest change that I've seen, and this can happen really early, is a big shift away from generalists to specialists. And I happen to be in the tech space. I've been in the internet now, I think 17, 18 years. And when I think now about the people that we need inside of the company, they're highly defined. When I think about someone that excels at SEM, at search engine marketing or SEO, that's all they do. They don't do TV. They don't do radio. They don't do any other marketing. They are very focused on SEM, SEO. They live, eat, and breathe it. They've got a unique skill set that's very particular to our business, or product marketing, or product management, or DBAs. You go from these generalist developers that can build anything to very highly specialized skill sets. Now, in building the team out of the gate, for me, and I think with a lot of kind of founder CEOs, you tend to take more of the strategy, business development, sales, marketing, creating of the product. And I think of that as like the front end of the business. And it starts with an awareness of your own strengths and weaknesses. Now, I suck at many, many different things. And so what's really weird when you're a founder or CEO is there's this prototype or archetype of an entrepreneur that can do everything. I actually find the exact opposite. And what I look for in starting any company is someone who's exceptionally good at everything that I suck at. Now, in the early stages, that person for me was John Sung, who was my partner in my incubator. At LegalZoom, that role is Frank Monaster. Frank is a West Point graduate, Harvard MBA, 2 tours of duty, captain in the Green Beret. He lives, eats, and breathes operations. It's just in his lifeblood. Everything that he does well in this world is the things that I'm the worst at. And it's a partnership of that, really, that front end and that back end, a vision and the ability to execute. That I really think of it as a 1-2. And in a lot of companies, you only see the 1, but the 2 is doing the hard work. And if you're starting up and you don't have someone that complements you, whichever side you happen to be on, I think that's the first and most important hire. What's interesting about that is Frank was one of the first 20 employees of LegalZoom and hired to be our COO. And then remains our COO and is exceptional at it now that we're over 500 people. And in the beginning phases, he was like, okay, all that matters is getting it done. It's a very flat organization. We had a lot of generalists. We were doing so many things with so little resources because we were growing off $1 million of friends and family. That's the only real capital we've used to fund the business. Now, as we got larger, it was really not about getting it done, but getting it right. And there's greater structure, there's a higher degree of specialization, there are larger investments in automation. And he was able, because he knew the inside out of the business, to grow with that business and manage it. And I think that's one of the roles that as you go from early stage to high growth, it's one of the roles that if you get the right person out of the gate, it really lets you accelerate farther down the line. It's one of the harder roles to find. And again, in that 1-2, that 1-2 can maintain through, I think, all phases. When I think about a CMO or a chief marketing officer, I don't think this is something that works at the early stages and at the later stages. In the early stages, you're establishing the brand one customer at a time. And for me, it's all about the trees, not the forest. I'm just trying to, what works for this customer? You're flipping, you're changing the ideas, you're rapidly moving. And when I think about that, that's really what a co-founder does. When I think of what a CMO does, they really step back, forest and trees. They're about growing and stewarding the brand. They have to have channel expertise, product marketing expertise, brand expertise. They tend to be kind of a mix. The great ones are quantitative and qualitative. They have to be both right brain and left brain. And you know what? In a startup, that person that needs usually a team to be really effective is not very effective in the early stages because they need more data, more people. They're really good at managing teams, but as a one-person shop, they can't do everything themselves. So that's one of the roles that I think it transitions. You're probably the CMO in your company. or very close to, or you're managing a VP of marketing or director of marketing very closely. As you get larger, that role definitively transitions. And it doesn't for everyone, but I think if you're a marketing-based company, it generally will. Pictured here is Eddie Hartman, who's one of our co-founders and our CTO, and he's a ridiculous genius. He's graduated summa cum laude, Yale Applied Mathematics. He published 13 children's books. He just passed the bar, never went to law school because he was talking to lawyers like, it's not that hard. So now he's a lawyer, like one of the few. He just took it for the hell of it after mentoring under a kind of a loophole for 6 years. And now he's a lawyer and an MBA. And he is your like uber genius mad scientist. Whatever you need to get done or to build, he'll build it. A team will say, that's 3 months, I think it's 4 developers, and then 48 hours later, he comes in, after 14 Red Bulls and doing a 48-hour stretch, he says, can you check this code? I think I built it. And don't tell me 3 months next time, right? Unbelievable talent to have in the early stages of a business. But as it got to a high-scale transactional business, it was about stability and scalability and security. And we brought in a CIO, and there was kind of heavy iron. And he was great on the development side, but he wasn't a hardware guy. And so the team had to develop, and it kind of managed this uber team of quick, rapid response developers to a team of 40, 50 people in technology, and that required a different leadership style. It required a different skill set, and that's where it got really, really specialized. When I think about a CFO, we didn't have one out of the gate. We had an accounting manager. And I think, again, the CFO is like the CMO. In the early stages, it's a really bad role to have, because when I think of what our CFO, this is Fred Krupika on the right, who's our CFO. This is someone that's taken companies public, bought and sold, set up international divisions, set up joint ventures. He's a guy with a lot of experience and a great deal of expertise around GAAP and SOX and automated revenue recognition and defining lines of credit reporting and forecasting. But in an early stage startup, number one, he'd be bored out of his mind. Number two, all of those skills and experiences don't apply because he can't leverage it. And in the beginning, we were on QuickBooks till we were like 40 million in revenues. And we would just put in revenue by day as one line. Right? And yeah, we had to replumb the entire thing when I got there and put it on a more mission-critical platform. But really, in the early stages, cash is king, and that's fairly easy to watch as an entrepreneur. But really, the role that I want to focus on is as a founder or as a CEO. And I found in kind of that early stage, if you want it done right, you tend to do it yourself. And if there's a problem, there's a fire to fight, and no one's on it, then you jump on it, and you jump on every fire. Now, yes, the core is you're selling the big idea, you're raising funds, you're kind of, again, part CMO, part biz dev, part CFO, but you're managing scarce resources, and you're doing everything yourself. It's that doing, that's that one trait that as you transition to a higher growth, that can kill you. And I think that's what the research showed, now that I come back at it with a little bit more rational mindset, is that sometimes what makes you really successful in the early stages can really hurt you just when you're most successful. Doing the exact same thing that got you there is what kills you in the next phase. And in managing growth, it's really about enabling and empowering teams, because at some point your business gets complex enough that you need to delegate. And that's a very different style of management, to build a world-class team around you that then builds a world-class team around them. You're not about creating the big idea, it's about proving it. And yes, you absolutely still need that confidence and that passion and that stubbornness and that persistency, but you've also got to question a lot more. You've got to empower other leaders across the organization, and it ends up being a little bit more metrics, more resources, and it's more of a balance of thinking and doing. And really, instead of fighting fires, sometimes you're anticipating them. There's still a lot of fires to fight in any business, but it's not managing scarce resources, but investing them appropriately. Now, what changes in this? And having talked with a lot of entrepreneurs and being in both situations, the biggest one is hiring other people and letting them make their own mistakes or empowering them. So sometimes I'll look at someone in a role and I'll say, I totally disagree with where you're going with this, but prove me wrong. One, they're a little bit more focused, and you kind of, sometimes you only know how deeply someone believes in it when you push back on it. But two, when they surprise you, then you know you got the right person in the role, and that's why 20% of your time doing it is not the right thing. And let someone that's doing it 100% of the time, that's an expert in that, if you can trust them, then it's about delegating, empowering, and you could do a lot more with people managing larger teams. The other thing that was really hard for me in the transition is it's not that you're actually slowing down, because your day-to-day is just as intense. You're working just as hard. Well, I mean, you're probably going from 100-hour weeks to 80-hour weeks. But you're moving consistently in the same direction, because that zigzag that you do in the early stages, if you've got 50 or 100 or 500 people behind you that are trying to follow you, they get confused. And when they get confused, a lot of people do nothing. They hide. They're afraid to put forward their ideas, or they're afraid to commit to a project because the company shifts. And you see a lot of my friends, kind of, as we talk through the problems of kind of growing a company, it's when they're shifting as quickly as they used to in the early stages, then they look behind them and no one's with them, right? And I think it's about stepping back and saying, what direction can we move? How can we communicate to everyone so we're moving in a direction? And then people move and take different tactics to get there. Right? But it's about charting that direction. And then kind of instinct and analysis. I think too many people, as they shift, go all the way over to the quantitative side. Right? I mean, again, being in the internet, this is my bias, so it may not apply to your industry, but we have a crap load of data. Well, we have a crap load of data, but not necessarily a lot of information. And there's a tendency as you get larger to analyze. And I think some people, particularly certain venture capitalists or private equity firms, force you into that mode, and you get paralysis, and you lose the instinct, and you lose the fire. But there's a balance there, and that balance is what's critical. What stays the same, I won't go into, this is kind of for another presentation, but I will highlight a few points, and that's that you as founder and CEO, your success still relies on the shoulders of the people around you. You're still managing teams. You're still arbiter of the brand. You're still a steward of the brand and of the vision. But I think your day-to-day has got to change. We're actually now in a kind of a different phase of growth at LegalZoom, which is how do we maintain high growth and then spur constant innovation? Our personal challenge is how do we reshape the legal industry? It's kind of a big industry. It's got a lot of problems. But how do we have that innovation while still having a larger business? And how can we move just as quickly? And our model, we're still working on it. We just set up an R&D center in San Francisco, and I think it opens up in December. And we've kind of fine-tuned. I got Eddie, that kind of our brilliant CTO and co-founder that's spearheading it. And we've got a lot of the old guard from the company coming back to focus on building brand new businesses inside of the company. We'll see how it works. But that's probably the topic for a different presentation. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time.